The UK is a trap, part 10b. In this episode, we wrap up the story of the Israelites in Egypt and how it relates to the story of the migrant in modern-day Britain. Egypt didn't change overnight. The purpose of Egypt changed. And Joseph didn't come to Egypt to rule. He was sold as a slave. Once inside the system, Joseph added value. He solved problems. And because he solved a national crisis in Egypt, Egypt elevated him. That's not because they loved him, but because they found him useful. So today, some migrants came by invitation, some came by necessity, and some came by force of circumstance. But the pattern is the same. Systems don't reward loyalty, they reward value. In the previous episode, I spoke about a new pharaoh who didn't know Joseph. Of course, he knew the history, but he didn't feel indebted to it. Systems don't remember who helped them yesterday. Instead, they focus on what threatens them tomorrow. They focus on how they can win elections, especially when Israelites were growing and flourishing and Egyptians started complaining, oh, they are becoming too many. The face of our country is changing. What's going on? They are taking over our jobs. Let's take our country back. The Israelites didn't do anything wrong, but the system changed its incentives. They took action, made announcements about reducing net migration, made it tougher to stay. Work was controlled, dependence on the system increased, and changes to freedom requirements were proposed. In Egypt, it was worse. There was forced labor, there was oppression. That's real slavery and, real chains. Now, I'm not saying that's happening today. All I'm saying is that control evolves. Today, control doesn't always show up as chains like it was in Egypt. It shows up as commitments, responsibilities, bills, mortgages, long-term obligations. None of these things are bad on their own, but together, they make walking away feel very expensive. So the system doesn't need to restrain you physically anymore. It restrains you economically. Once your life is structured around debts, contracts, obligations, your choices narrow. Even if nothing looks wrong on the surface, you're not forced to stay, but it gets to a point where living becomes kind of unrealistic. So when Moses showed up, it wasn't about food because the Israelites had food already. Moses came with uncertainty. Moses was saying, this is not what you were created for. Can you not see the system is chaining you down? And the response was telling. They replied, Moses, at least we are eating in Egypt. Are we even sure there's food and security in Canaan? They were happy to be fed inside a cocoon. What matters to them is at least we are safe. We have a roof over our head. We are provided for. Inside this cocoon, they were unable to roam, to hunt, or to have choice and freedom. In fact, they owned nothing in Egypt. But some of the Israelites were happy with this. At least we have a roof over our head and we have food to eat. Egypt trained them to survive so well that freedom began to feel irresponsible. Some of them even had PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from thinking about the famine that they experienced in their homeland. So leaving Egypt felt reckless and staying became the most sensible option for them. So some of them said to Moses, please leave us alone. We are happy to be slaves here. At least we are well fed. Where we are coming from, are we not slaves? Is there food there? Is there security? So what's the real lesson here? This story is not about Egypt being evil. It's not about Israel being perfect. It's about understanding systems. Egypt may have helped you survive, but it was never designed to secure your future forever. Some people followed Moses, some stayed back. Both made a choice. The real question isn't whether Egypt works today. It's about building options for the day that it changes its mind. A British-born UK Deputy Prime Minister was recently asked to go home by another politician. UK-born, at the highest level of public service. Let that sink in. If you want to know the Deputy Prime Minister I'm talking about and where his parents were from originally, Google it. The UK is a trap. A clarification. I think this moment in history matters. It echoes an old pattern. Remember my last post? A new pharaoh arose who didn't know Joseph. Belonging can always be questioned and history can be rewritten overnight. Think about it. Have you actually even considered that this may not be about us? Yes, we give our children the best education. Some of us even had our kids here in this country. But then again, a British-born Deputy Prime Minister, not a first-generation migrant, was told to go home. At the very top and in plain sight, a new pharaoh can arise. Not when Joseph was still alive. When you are long gone and your kids remain. At least, your kids are the reason why you relocated, isn't it? When home ties are blurred and return is no longer obvious. The Israelites lived in Goshen at the time and it looked comfortable, safe and prosperous even. But contribution never guarantees belonging. The lesson here isn't fear, it's foresight. I'm not doing this for myself, I'm doing it for my kids. At least they have the British passport and their future is secure. Is it? Now, let's be clear about what I'm not saying. My argument has never been about the fact that people are not doing well in the UK. Of course they do. In fact, when you say you're doing well, you're making my argument for me, because my point has never been about success. It's always been about ownership, freedom, and leverage. Doing well is not the same thing as being free. Having comfort is not having control, and income is not ownership. Let me explain. In the UK, doing well almost always means a combination of the following: a good income, a stable professional job, a mortgaged home, a financed car, good school for kids, regular holidays, a sense of order, safety, and predictability, a sense of have made it. Now, none of these are bad in themselves, but notice something important. These are all consumption and participation metrics, not power metrics, because in the real sense of it, doing well is actually unencumbered ownership, optionality. This is the ability to live, to pivot, to pause without your life falling apart. Ability to make a choice of where you live, earn, or retire without the fear of any policy changes. So to the people saying, oh, but some are really doing well here, I agree, but there's a deeper question. After 20 to 30 years, what do you actually own? Because if the ownership of that item or that thing is contingent on direct debits coming out of your account every month and you need to have money there, do you really own it? Paying into a system forever isn't wealth, it's participation. And if your entire sense of success depends on staying in a system indefinitely, then comfort has already done its job. No, I'm not saying this because I'm struggling. I've been in this country for over 19 years during the HSMP era. I've worked across different multiple industries, public sector, financial services, telecoms, energy, and I have a thriving business. I understand systems, risk, and control. So no, this isn't bitterness. It is pattern recognition. The question isn't whether the UK is good or bad. The question is whether you have an end in mind. So if you've built ownership, choice, and leverage, my message is not for you, because obviously you understand it. But if you left your home country on survival mode and you are still struggling, battling at the lower rung of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, looking for food, clothing, and shelter, my message is not for you either. It will fly over your head, but eventually you'll get there. And to those that are confident in the system, they know that the system is always fair. They have a thriving business. Please Google what happened to previous Chelsea owner, Roman Abramovich, and what happened to his assets, the proceeds of his sale of Chelsea Football Club. If all your success depends on permanent compliance inside one system, then this series simply holds up the mirror in front of you. Comfort can feel like freedom until one day it isn't. The UK is a trap, the penultimate version. A few people have asked me, BC, how are you coping with the backlash you're getting from your post about the UK being a trap? The simple answer is, I expected it and I prepared for it. Listen, the moment you decide that you want to put your voice out there, especially when you have contrarian views, backlash is inevitable. It's not unusual, it's expected. What you're seeing isn't outrage, it's cognitive dissonance. Because on the one hand, you have someone who has built, worked, and paid for a long time into a system. And on the other hand, you have someone who believes that he has escaped the famine in his land and is now in his El Dorado. And then you come along and say, maybe this UK is not the El Dorado you believe that it is. Of course, people are not going to listen to understand. They are going to listen to reply. How dare you say something like that disrupts my calm and comfortable life? Because now it feels personal. It feels like an attack. How can you say the UK is a trap, you ingrate? Are you trying to say that my sacrifices are pointless? So instead of engaging with the merit of what's been said, some attack the person, they call you names, they question your motives, pure ad hominems. But that's fine. I'm a student of human nature and that behavior is predictable. So how do I handle the backlash? First, let's be clear. Intelligent disagreement is welcome. If you want to engage thoughtfully, you want to challenge the ideas, you want to test the logic, be my guest. But the honest truth is I'm actually not here to debate because my position is not a hot take. It's intellectually thought through, analyzed, and lived over the years. So I'm not particularly obligated to convince anyone and I don't owe anyone a seat at the table. So I do a lot of filtering. If you disagree respectfully, fine. But if you resort to personal insults, attack my character, instead of attacking the arguments, misrepresent what I said, or argue against something I never said, or if you try to hijack my space to push your own narrative, I don't announce, I don't say anything. I just take away the privilege of you seeing my posts. Not out of emotion, it's just basic housekeeping, because not every comment deserves engagement and not every disagreement deserves airtime. I'm only here to speak clearly and not to be dragged into noise. So yeah, that's how I handle it. So if you're out there and you have something to say that goes beyond trends, validation, and applause, especially if it aligns with your purpose, say it anyway. That's why this reminds me of the Israelite story. When Moses tried to lead them out of Egypt, many resisted him, insulted him, questioned his motives. Why? Because they preferred the familiarity of bondage to the uncertainty of freedom. And even Moses got really angry at some point. What is wrong with you people? But that's life. So say what needs to be said and let people do what they want to do with it. That's my message for you today. The UK is a trap, the full context, and grand finale. This series didn't start because I want to complain, lament, or compare the UK with any other country. Instead, it's as a result of pattern recognition to expose structures so that people can plan properly, think long-term, and create options. Because comfort, when misunderstood, can quietly become captivity. We began with the illusion of comfort, noting that comfort controls people more than poverty. Poverty makes people fight, but comfort makes people accept. Running on a hamster wheel they didn't design, inside a system they didn't bother to interrogate. And this system is very good at keeping you comfortable. It encourages mortgages you will pay for most of your working life, car finance, credit cards. Nobody forces you, and that's the point. A trap never looks like danger. It presents as opportunity until the door quietly closes behind you and shuts. And then we move to identity erosion, which happens gradually. This is the identity tax nobody talks about. Your kids don't speak your language, they don't eat your food, they don't understand your jokes and proverbs or way of life. You wanted a better life for them, but nobody warned you that with better life comes identity separation. Another thing as a migrant, the warmth and communal living you are used to gets replaced with isolation and a lot of distance. And then we moved to the hardest truth. Your children will not choose your values. Not because you failed as a parent or didn't sacrifice enough, but simply because environment shapes values more than intention ever can. And you may be thinking, I have my future secure and my pension plan is ring-fenced. Don't beat your chest that you'll be fine until reality stares at you tall in the face, especially when you are still in your 30s and 40s. Then we talked about men. How this system reshapes men, masculinity, and fatherhood. The system is set up such that any conflict in the home starts with separation first, conversation later. And the man is usually the one who is asked to step out for a bit. And when you are the one who is asked to leave anytime there's conflict, you learn to suppress, to filter your words, to retreat. Not because you are weak, but because you understand the cost of expression may be high. Over time, this produces men who are subdued, careful, and compliant. History is very clear on this. Systems prefer men that are weak because weak men don't challenge authority. Now let's talk about how the entire system is centered around finance and the debt culture. Student loans subtly and covertly encouraged from a very young age. And credit cards to build your credit profile, and then car finance made easy. But business loans, capital to build something, ownership, that's very, very hard. Consumption is rewarded, ownership is questioned. And then you have some people say, we own nothing in this world. The world itself is a trap. Let's just make the most of it and enjoy life while we are here. That sounds deep until it doesn't. It's selective philosophy. Because if that were enough, why did you migrate from your home country in the first instance? Why didn't you stay where you were born and say, this is fate. This is where I'm meant to be. I'll just stay here and make the most of it. Yes. Life is transient, but transience does not cancel legacy. Instead, it makes intentionality urgent. And this is why the story of Joseph in Egypt matters. Joseph rules in Egypt not because he belonged, but because he solved the problem. Egypt elevated him because it needed him. It's not love, it's not loyalty, it's simply utility. And while Joseph was useful, it was protected. But scripture is very clear on this. Another Pharaoh arose who did not know Joseph. Same land, same system, different ruler, different posture. Please remember, usefulness is not belonging. Now bring that to today. According to Sky News on Saturday, 20th December 2025, hundreds of foreign prison officers, many from Nigeria, were facing deportation under new visa rules. They were frontline staff in essential roles. Yet, tough rules were applied to bring net migration down because election campaign promises must be fulfilled. Until the system realized something quite uncomfortable. If they leave, the prison system collapses. And then suddenly they made reluctant emergency extensions. Not citizenship, not permanence, not security. Just one more year. Removable and fillers of shortages until they are not needed again. Reliable workforce, essential staff, stabilizers of collapsing industries. This is the mistake people keep making. They confuse usefulness with belonging. No, this series is not saying leave the UK. It's saying see clearly. You can actually physically remain within a system and carefully avoid its trap. If you recognize it early enough and if you deliberately learn how to circumnavigate it. Yes, you can learn to navigate a system successfully. You can reduce your risk exposure, and many people will, successfully. But the enduring, lasting solution remains the same. A lion thrives best in its natural habitat. Every system has limits it will never let you cross. And every borrowed environment has conditions attached. You can survive in captivity. You can even be well fed there. But survival is not sovereignty. Yes, learn the rules, build options, and devise ways to move around the system. But never forget this. Adaptation is never the same as belonging. Comfort can never be the same as freedom. In the long run, the lion must return to where it was designed to thrive. And this isn't sentiment, it's structural reality. And that's the final lens through which this entire series should be understood. And you have some people say, we own nothing in this world. The world itself is a trap. Let's just make the most of it and enjoy life while we are here. That sounds deep until it doesn't. It's selective philosophy. Because if that were enough, why did you migrate from your home country in the first instance? Why didn't you stay where you were born and say, this is fate? This is where I'm meant to be. I'll just stay here and make the most of it. Yes, life is transient, but transience does not cancel legacy. Instead, it makes intentionality urgent. And this is why the story of Joseph in Egypt matters. Joseph rules in Egypt not because he belonged, but because he solved the problem. Egypt elevated him because it needed him. It's not love, it's not loyalty, it's simply utility. And while Joseph was useful, it was protected. But scripture is very clear on this. Another Pharaoh arose who did not know Joseph. Same land, same system, different ruler, different posture. Please remember, usefulness is not belonging. Now bring that to today. According to Sky News on Saturday, 20th December 2025, hundreds of foreign prison officers, many from Nigeria, were facing deportation under new visa rules. They were frontline staff in essential roles. Yet, tough rules were applied to bring net migration down because election campaign promises must be fulfilled. Until the system realized something quite uncomfortable. If they leave, the prison system collapses. And then suddenly they made reluctant emergency extensions. Not citizenship, not permanence, not security. Just one more year. Removable and fillers of shortages until they are not needed again. Reliable workforce, essential staff, stabilizers of collapsing industries. This is the mistake people keep making. They confuse usefulness with belonging. No, this series is not saying leave the UK. It's saying see clearly. You can actually physically remain within a system and carefully avoid its trap. If you recognize it early enough and if you deliberately learn how to circumnavigate it. Yes, you can learn to navigate a system successfully. You can reduce your risk exposure, and many people will, successfully. But the enduring, lasting solution remains the same. A lion thrives best in its natural habitat. Every system has limits it will never let you cross. And every borrowed environment has conditions attached. You can survive in captivity. You can even be well fed there. But survival is not sovereignty. Yes, learn the rules, build options, and devise ways to move around the system. But never forget this. Adaptation is never the same as belonging. Comfort can never be the same as freedom. In the long run, the lion must return to where it was designed to thrive. And this isn't sentiment, it's structural. I finalized the UK as a trap series, but recent incidents has pulled out something we all need to reflect on. There's a pattern I keep seeing, especially among Nigerians in the diaspora, and it's quite worrying. Every single time bad news come out of Nigeria, an accident, a tragedy, an unfortunate incident, the reflex response is always the same. Nigeria happened to them. Before facts are established, before getting any details, before establishing the validity of what actually happened, the response is always the same. This is what confirmation bias is, and it's not the way to analyze issues. When bad news starts to feel like proof that you escaped, and you're looking for emotional reassurance that you took the right decision, when you get comments like, "I would have died in 2019 if I was in Nigeria," thank God for the UK. Can you not just be grateful for your health restoration without disparaging Nigeria? Take the Abuja incident involving the Arise News journalist. The narrative was already fixed before people got the full story. Nigeria happened to her. The system failed her. Some people even said, she should have listened to her father because her father warned her not to relocate back to Nigeria from the UK. All of this was said without establishing any facts, just assumptions. And even after details emerged that she jumped off a building out of fear, Nigerians still insisted on forcing the same conclusion that Nigeria happened to her. At this point, it's not about establishing the truth anymore. It just becomes like we're looking for coping mechanisms. Now, let me be clear. Nigerians have been traumatized, I know. We've lived through successive failures, and we have deep mistrust for government. And yes, leaders must be held accountable when they fail, but trauma is not truth. Not every unfortunate incident that occurs in Nigeria is the fault of Nigeria or the government. Bad things happen everywhere. When unfortunate incidents happen abroad, people pause, they wait for facts, they ask questions. But when it happens at home, we rush to judgment because once you decide the conclusion first, facts no longer matter. You just rearrange them to fit the narrative you prefer or the story you want to believe. In the next video, I'll talk about the Anthony Joshua incident and why the UK and US comparisons are lazy and dishonest. In the last video, I spoke about this dangerous reflex of saying Nigeria happened to them before establishing facts. In this video, I want to discuss the Anthony Joshua incident and why the way Nigerians in the diaspora responded was lazy and dishonest. Anthony Joshua was involved in a car accident that led to the unfortunate passing of two of his friends. May their souls rest in peace. But what was the first response from many Nigerians? Nigeria happened to them. How? Suddenly, there's no personal responsibility and everything becomes Nigeria's fault? Emergency response. Were you there? Do you know for a fact that first responders were not present? Or did you just jump to the most comfortable conclusion, the one that suits you into believing that Nigeria must always be at fault? If Nigerians are the scene helped out of our communal wants before emergency services arrived, how does that automatically mean that Nigeria failed? This is where the comparison becomes dishonest. People keep comparing everything with England and America as if they are the global referee. In those systems, when something bad is happening, people face their front, people mind their business. At best, they are told to call the police. For example, when a store is being robbed, you are asked to mind your business. You don't intervene. But that's not Nigeria. We need to understand context here. We are not a cold people, we are warm. And when we see accidents, we will intervene. Yes, there's foolishness. People bringing out phones to record content for social media. That deserves criticism. But Nigerians are warm people. When they see accidents, they intervene. They help instinctively. So stop judging Nigerian behavior using foreign frameworks and then acting surprised when the conclusions don't fit. That's not the way to analyze. That's simply contextual blindness. Let me give you another example. I went into a hospital here in the UK and I saw the ceiling leaking, water dripping into the waiting room. I took a picture and I shared it in a group. Immediately, people jumped to the UK's defense. That will be fixed very quickly. Oh no, that's normal. It will be fixed within 2 days. Look at that grace. People died here in the UK during COVID. Did you say UK happened to them? People now travel to Nigeria from the UK to go and carry out medical procedures because of ridiculous waiting times at the NHS. So what now? Is healthcare only valid when it involves emergency response during an accident? What about people quietly ignored or neglected by the same system that you praise every day? Why does grace apply abroad and condemnation applies at home? Listen to this uncomfortable truth. No matter how long you live abroad, no matter how comfortable you become, You will remain a Nigerian. You will never become British or American or Australian. So if Nigeria is constantly being portrayed by you as broken, lawless, and irredeemable, do not be surprised if that same level of disrespect follows you everywhere you go. Criticize Nigeria when criticism is due. Call out failure when it exists. But stop using tragedy as emotional validation that you made the right choice leaving. Pause. Get the facts. Use context. Nigeria is flawed, yes, but it's ours. The UK Trap from Diagnosis to Solutions. Late last year, I did a UK is a Trap series which went viral and landed quite well across the board. That series wasn't about solutions, it was about identifying the problem, because the first step in fixing anything is in being honest that there's something to fix in the first place. I received some backlash while doing the series, and most of it wasn't really about what I said, it was more about what people heard. Some said I'm ungrateful, some said many people are thriving in the UK, some made it about Nigeria, saying that if Nigeria is not the way it is, we wouldn't even be here. Others took issue with the word trap itself, but none of these points actually engage with the argument. Now let's deal with the diction gratitude. Gratitude applies to people, not systems. A system is not benevolent, it's transactional. It uses you when you are useful and moves on when you are not. And when people say many are thriving, I think the definition of thriving has been reduced to money alone. If thriving means being well fed, comfortable and contained, like our favorite lion in the zoo, then yeah, many people are thriving. But thriving without autonomy, direction or purpose is still a trade-off. Whether that trade-off is acceptable is a personal decision. Lastly, this is not a UK versus Nigeria comparison, and turning it into that misses the point entirely. Now to the word many people are fixated with, trap. It's a metaphor here in this context. It's not literal, and it's not something you are dragged into. It's something that looks harmless at the start. It looks like opportunity, progress, sometimes even an escape. And once you step into it, the door doesn't slam shut immediately. It quietly closes. True comforts, obligations, and dependencies that you didn't fully see at the beginning. Now that's what I was describing. So to the budding and experienced content creators deliberately misquoting and reshaping what I've said to create content, that's fine. If the message is strong enough to be repackaged, it's already doing its job. Thanks for the additional exposure. But if indeed you lack comprehension skills, I would recommend The Heart of Reading, Damon Young. Now back to the subject. Some of these pressures that the UK trap presents show up more sharply for migrants because of the transition element. But these traps are not unique to migrants, they are systemic. Migrants often experience them earlier because migration makes them interact quicker with the institution. Citizens experience them too. Same machinery, same system, different entry points. Now an important caveat on the solution series. This is not advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not telling anyone what to do. Solutions are nuanced, and what works for someone may be completely wrong for another person. People are at different stages of life and want different things. Someone that is struggling with survival and stability is not thinking about self-actualization. The UK system is what it is, I can't change it, but I have agency on how I position myself in it, how dependent I become, how much optionality I build, and whether I understand the system well enough not to allow it define my ceiling. So this is about solutions, not ideology or escape fantasies, just clarity about how to build options and long-term exit strategies. You can't fix what you refuse to name, but now that it's named, we can talk about what comes next. My name is BC David, and I'll see you on the next one.